Hello there, this is Dimitris Christou, and we're back with another video tutorial. And this time around, we're going to be taking non-destructible objects in Blender. And by talking about non-destructible objects, we refer to an object that can be altered or modified using some modifiers and stuff like that in our 3D application. But it can also then be brought back to its original state and then be further modified. It can easily be brought back to the original state in a few clicks, and that means that we are altering the object, but we are actually not destroying it. So the ideal object to create a nice example for it is to I'll hit the delete key to erase the default cube, and I'll hit Shift A to add a text object. Now I'll hit 7 on my numeric keypad to switch to top perspective view and 5 to switch to top ortho view. And while the text object is selected, I'm going to hit the tab key to switch to edit mode, and I'll delete the text and I'm going to write down bend. Now tab key again, and let's move right here at the object data for our text, and you can see the text options. And first thing I'm going to do is change the align from left to center in order to center the text, and let's make the our text an actual 3D object, and I'm going to increase the extrude value to 0.24 so you can see our text here is extruded. Now 7 on my numeric keypad to switch to top ortho view, and I'll hit the del key on my numeric keypad again in order to frame the text, and I'll hit Ctrl Alt 0 just to place my camera, and I'll also right click this frame to select the camera and move to the object panel here for the location, rotation, scale data. I'm going to zero out the X value, set the Y value to a nice round 0.35, and I'm going to bring the Z value, and that's a height, because as you can see we have the camera pointing straight down to our text. And let's bring the Z value for the camera position to 4.5. Okay. Now we have the text in place, the camera is positioned. I'll now hit Shift A to add mesh a plane. Now I'll hit 1 on my numeric keypad to switch to front ortho view, and let's zoom in a bit so we can take a closer look. And I'll hit the Z key to grab the plane and the Z key to constrain the movement on the Z axis, and I'm going to move my plane down at about here. Okay. Now 0 on my numeric keypad to switch back to camera perspective view, and I'll also set the Y value for my plane here to 0.35, and I'll now hit the S key to scale the plane up at about there. Okay. So we have the plane, the text, and the camera positioned. I'm going to select the lamp here and hit 7 to switch to top ortho view, and let's move our point light here a bit. I'll hit the Z key to grab it, move it at about here, and again hit 1 on my numeric keypad to switch to front ortho view, and hit the Z key to grab the lamp and the Z key to constrain movement on the Z axis, and I'll bring it just a bit down at about here. Okay. Now time to work with our text object. I'm right clicking the bend word here to select it and hit 0 to switch to camera perspective view. Now I'll move to the modifiers panel, click here for the modifiers, and I'm going to add a build modifier. So we've seen the build modifier before, and what the build modifier does is that it actually starts from frame 1 and it builds our object in length of 100 frames, as you can see here. So if we scroll the animation, you can see the object build over time. Now what I'm going to do for the build modifier is click here to randomize, and you can see how my text looks right now. And I'm going to increase the length value to the actual end of our animation. So the start frame is set to 1 and I'll set the length to 240. Okay. Now for my next modifier I'm going to need an empty, so I'll hit Shift A to add an empty. Now 7 on my numeric keypad, and I'll just change the Y value from 0 to 0.35 so that the empty is roughly positioned at the center of my text. You can see right here. So the empty is in place. I'm going to select the text and I'll add a custom modifier. So as I've said in a previous video tutorial, the custom modifier is rarely used, but we're using it again. So I'm hitting 0 on my numeric keypad to switch to camera perspective view, and the first thing I'm going to change to the custom modifier is change the control object. Click right here and change it to empty. So we're now having the empty control the custom modifier, and you can see it. I'm right clicking the empty to select it, and I'm going to hit the G key to grab the empty and the X key to move it on the X axis, and you can see what the custom modifier works based on the position of the empty. Now I'll move the empty to the side. Let's move it at about, let's say -2 on the x-axis, and let's right click text to select it, and let's change the settings a bit, or let's just first add some animation for the empty. Now I'll move back to frame 1. Don't worry, you won't be seeing the text because of the build modifier. So I'm back at frame 1. I'll hit the I key and insert the location keyframe for my empty here, and click over here to move down to frame 240 to move further at the end of our animation, and I'll hit the T key to grab and the X key to move on the X axis, and I'll move the empty at a +2 value for the X axis. And again I'm going to hit the I key and insert a new location keyframe. So now you can see how it works. Okay, now let's change our custom modifier a bit more. I'm right clicking the text to select it, and let's move our empty at about here, and I'm going to change the cast type from sphere to cylinder, and I'll also bring the factor down to a negative value, and I'm going to set it, let's set it to -1.2. okay, and I'll also increase the radius for the cast modifier, and I suppose it's the radius that the cast modifier affects the object geometry, and let's set it to 1, and I'm also going to go back to frame 1 and let's see how it looks. And I think it looks nice. Now perhaps I should bring the factor down, okay, to -1.1. So let's take a look at the animation again. I think it looks pretty nice, and it's time for us to add 2 final modifiers for our text object here, and I'm going to add the Solidify Modifier, and I'm doing this let's disable a view, the 3D view for the Solidify modifier. I'm going to click this little eye here, and as you can see, we have the faces of the text object, and they're really thin, they're paper thin, and don't have any thickness. Now if we add the Solidify modifier, and I'm enabling again the Solidify modifier for my 3D viewport, you can see that the text now has some thickness to it. Let's just increase it a bit at about there, and I think it looks slightly better now. And last modifier I'm going to add to my text is going to be a, let's see, an edge split modifier. Okay, so I'm hitting 0 on my numeric keypad to switch to camera perspective view, and I think that we have the animation and the modifiers and everything looking pretty nice. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is just add a material for my text here. Let's click new. I'm going to change this material to text matte. Bring down the specular value, the intensity from 0.5 to 0, and I'll add some emit for the shading options. And what I'm actually going to do is let the text illuminate the plane and generally our scene. Now we have set the emit value for the text material to 0.5, and in order to take advantage of this emit value, we need to go to the world settings and click indirect lighting here, and for indirect lighting to work, we need to click here for the approximate gather solution, and I'll also click pixel cache. So we're telling Blender that we want the object that have an emit value illuminate our scene using indirect lighting. Okay, now I'll hit 0 on my numeric keypad to switch to camera perspective view again, and I'm going to move some frames down at about here, and let's go back to our material, and I think I'd like to add some transparency. Click here to add some transparency, and I'm going to use again the Z transparency just to keep it simple and keep the render times, you know, reasonably low. I'll just increase the Fresnel value at about here and change the alpha from 1 to 0.9. Okay, now let's see the animation again, and I think I have this slight thing that bothers me a bit. You can see that the empty starts up pretty slowly and then speeds up and then slows down again at the end. So I'm going to split my 3D view here, create a new window. I'm going to right click to select the empty, and I'm going to change this one to a graph editor. Okay, now we have the location keyframes here for our empty, and what I'm actually going to do is click with the Y and the Z location to delete them, and hit delete key to delete them, because we actually move our empty only in the X location. So I'll now hit the A key to select both my keyframes for the X location for the empty, and let's see it better. And I'm moving here and click key and interpolation mode and change it to linear. Okay, and as you can see here, we have the empty moving at a constant rate across the animation time. Let's see it again. Okay, that's just a minor thing, but if you want to, feel free to fix it. Okay, now that we have our viewport here splitted, I'm going to change the graph editor. Click here and change it to a node editor. Okay, And one thing more, and since I've said that I'm planning to use the text to illuminate my scene, I'm going to select the lamp, and I'll change the energy value from 1 to 0.2. So we're having just a bit of lightning coming out of the lamp. So I'll also increase the soft size for my lamp. I'll set it to 6, and I'll increase the samples from 1 to 12. Okay, now let's move some frames down at about here, and let's just render a frame to see what we got. And this is how it looks. Okay, escape key now, and since we have the compositing window here, let's click this one and use nodes. We have the render layer and the composite node. Let's move them to the side, and first of all I'll add output viewer node. Let's make them bigger, and I'll also add filter a glare node. Let's connect the glare node, and let's connect it to the viewer as well, and let's click backdrop also, and you can see the glare node here. We're going to use the streaks here. I'll increase the number from 4 to 5, and I'll now bring down the threshold simply because I want Blender to apply the streaks filter on some pixels that aren't super bright. You know, by bringing the threshold down, you're making a stronger glare effect. And okay, I think it looks nice as it is. And I'll now hit Shift A to add distort and lens distortion node. I'm going to connect the lens distortion node as well, and let's just increase the dispersion value here. Let's bring it to 0.1, and I think it looks okay. Now don't forget, to get the lens distortion output, we have it connected to our viewer, but we should also connect the output to the composite node, so that the compositing will be also applied to the final rendered image. Okay, now we have the compositing. I think we're pretty done with it. And at the beginning of the video tutorial, I talked about non-destructible objects. And let's say that we want to change the text here into another object and create another scene on the fly in a few clicks. And by creating this setup, you'd call it a rig or whatever. By creating this setup, we're making sure that we can change the entire scene in a few clicks. So I'm going to right click to select text, move here to the materials. I'm just going to change the diffuse color. Okay, let's set it to here, and what I'm also going to do is hit the tab key to switch from object to edit mode, and you can see we still have a text object here, and I'm going to hit backspace and change the bend text to love. Now tab key again to switch from object to edit to switch from edit to object mode, and I'll hit 0 on my main keypad to switch back to camera perspective view. And let's see how the new animation looks. We have a wholly different text here. And it looks pretty nice. Now let's render this one again. Let's render an image so we can see it. Okay, now so as you can see, this is pretty much it, and we've proven that we can create objects that can be easily modified even after we have tweaked them a lot. And as you can see, we have a text object here. You can do whatever you want with it. Okay, I'm just typing hate here, and let's render this one. So this is a tutorial. You can easily create your own objects, you can easily create your own messages. Feel free to change the message, the color, and again I'll be rendering some examples for you to see. So this is it, and thanks for watching.